Dramatic lighting really adds so much impact to a scene card. It creates a beautiful atmosphere, and you know what? It's not that hard to do. Trust me, follow the 5 tips that I'll be sharing in this video. Give it a try and you will see. Tip number 1 is know your light source. In order to add that beautiful glow to our images, first of all we have to know where that glow comes from, right? So the first thing you need to do is to assess your light source and determine the position of each element in your scene with respect to it. In today's example, the main light source is the fire in the fireplace. We do have a couple of candles, but their contribution is not important, so we can forget about them for now. For this particular card, I created a masked scene so that once my stamping is done, I can immediately determine where everything sits with respect to the fireplace. But if you were working with die-cut images, what you could do is to use your stamps to sort of create your scene, take a picture with your phone so that you have that as a reference, and use that while you color your images before you die-cut them out and you create your scene. Tip number 2 is block your highlights first. There are 2 key aspects to a coloring like this. One is your shadows, and we'll talk about that later, and the other one is your highlights, which is where you are going to create that beautiful glow. So we need to determine where those highlights are and block them in first thing so that we can protect them. So grab a marker in a color that's compatible to your light source and start blocking in those areas. In this case, because we have flames, I'm going to use a light yellow marker, and the areas where you typically want to add your highlights are the ones that are closer to your light source. For this scene, the fire will diffuse the light in every direction, and the highlights will typically sit on the areas of each image that are closest to the fire. For the puppy, it will be his forehead, the tip of his arms, and the top of his legs. There will also be highlights all around the fireplace, on the wood logs, as well as on the wall, the floor and the carpet. Tip number 3 is add your color gradually and start with the light marker. Now that we have the highlights blocked in, the next step is to actually start adding color to our images. And my suggestion is to start with the lightest marker in whatever color you want to use and fill each section with that first. At this step, we want to make sure not to cover the highlights, but we can start blending the 2 colors together if we want to. And there are 2 reasons why I suggest that you start with a light marker. The first one is that if you start light, you always have some room to fix any mistakes. One example here is the carpet, where I accidentally went over an area where I had the highlight first, but I was able to actually go back in with my light yellow marker and kind of bleach out that excess red that I had in those spots, and in the end result you're actually not able to see that I made that mistake. The second reason to start with a light marker lies in the fact that we are going to blend colors from different color families. That is, your yellow highlights and whatever color you're using for a specific area. The thing is, when blending colors from different color families, it is much easier to get a nice blend if you use colors that are similarly dark. So by starting with your lightest yellow in this case, and your lightest color for the area that you're choosing, you're going to make sure to have this smooth blend that is going to create, in the end, this soft, nice glow, which is the result we are after. And notice that I'm going to do this also for areas that in the end will be very dark, and this is because by having this first layer with my lighter marker, I have an initial transition between the yellow and, in this case, for example, the browns that I'm using inside the fireplace. This transition is then something I can build on when I go in with my darker markers, and even in this case I'm going to have this soft blend between my yellow and my darker browns. Tip number 4 is don't be shy with your shadows. Once we have the first color laid down, we can go ahead and start building depth and dimension in the images by adding progressively darker markers. You can do this as you usually do, adding 2 or 3 different markers to create that nice contrast, but one thing is very important: don't be shy. For this card here, I even came back after the entire card was over and I added a little bit more shading to the puppy, and it makes a huge difference. While you add your shading, also keep in mind cast shadows. For example, there's going to be a cast shadow under the puppy, one that is cast by the carpet onto the floor, and then we're going to have some shadows around the fireplace because that is actually coming out of the wall, and the walls of the fireplace are blocking the light from reaching the areas of the wall immediately around it. At this stage, I also decided to swap my light yellow marker for one that was a little bit darker, but even more importantly, warmer, because again, this adds more warmth to the scene. Tip number 5 is use your background. Your scene is ready and it's time to assemble it on a card, and your card base is as important as your scene. Choose a card base of a color that matches your color palette and go a little bit darker than you did on your scene. This is going to really bring out those highlights even more and give more emphasis to the hard work we put into creating that glow. One more tip for today is to remember to have fun. That's what crafting is about after all. If you're interested in learning more about coloring with alcohol markers, here's a video that shows how to create a soft, wintry scene. So check that out if you're interested. And as always, thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.